At least we got Gemma out of there. And we got some answers, but we also got some questions. So, when I finished this supersized season finale, over an hour, glorious. They did, I have to say. Do you think they fed us good? Well, here's my theory. I was a little slightly disappointed. I have so many theories about this episode. But overall, I was a little disappointed when the episode ended, knowing that the scripts for season 3 aren't even completed yet, much less close to going into production. Ben Stiller, he promises it won't take another 3 years, but I think it might take another 2. Aw, man. But in making this video and writing out my thoughts and trying to answer some of the questions that I think are brought up and come to terms with some of the answers that were given, etc., I do feel some really interesting, cool stuff happened during the season finale. And while I would have preferred more interesting, cool stuff to happen and to get more answers, although I have theories on that, I feel I came to a understanding of what this show is really about, which I think is going to help me going forward appreciating it. But I think bottom line is that I still deeply care about these characters, and I really want to see what happens to them next. So you probably just finished the season finale. What kind of swirl of emotion are you dealing with right now? And is it evolving in any particular way the more you think about it? And I think I'm going to help too. Let's discuss. And I'd be curious, write how you feel now, but then at the end of this video, write how you feel then. All right, so I think a big question people are going to have, and people were already asking me because I saw the finale a couple of days before you and I tweeted about it. And some of you were like, is the season 2 finale as good as the season 1 finale? Probably one of the best season finales of all time. I think it's close. I think it's definitely a close call, but I would argue that while the season 1 finale took a very slow moving show and then suddenly gave it this giant burst of momentum, which was thrilling. It was a jolt. I watched that season 1 finale on the edge of my seat for what was going to happen. Where here, a lot of the reason I was on the edge of my seat, I was like, you're going to give me some more answers than that, right? Right? So on that note, I would say that this season finale feels a little repetitive to me. A little bit like, sure, we got Gemma out, but we're kind of going in circles a little bit because, the original show, well, the first season was so original, but season 2, it feels a little more like I'm sensing some of the tropes that are in a lot of television and movie writing. So they're like, all right, next season, it's going to be the reverse. And Mark is the one trapped in Lumen. And now we need to know if Gemma can get him out. And I don't know how satisfying that's going to be, not just from a writing perspective, but an acting perspective. Because Deachin Lockman has an amazing look. And I think she's a fine actress. She's very likable. But I don't think from what I've seen, she's at the level of the rest of the cast on this show. But you know what? Maybe she just hasn't been given the right opportunity yet. Let's see what happens. I mean, we're gonna find out. I don't think Gemma would be like, I can't take any more of this and move somewhere else. I mean, she's gonna have to get Mark out. That's gonna have to be what season 3 is about. I have other theories as well as about what I think will be season 3, and I'm excited to share them with you. Now, speaking of great acting, while Britt Lauer started off this season strong with the Helly Helena twist, and she really did a wonderful job. And John Turturro in episode 4. Iconic! They both deserve to be nominated for their performances. But to me, by the end of this season, the strongest performances in season 2, hands down, are Tremel Tillman, who really deserves some recognition for this show, and Mr. Adam Scott. Wow! The way he plays Mark S and Mark Scout, his Innie and his Outie, in the same scenes, and some, their first conversation here simultaneously, it was incredible. He does a dialogue-heavy scene and an action-heavy scene. Essentially, it's 2 characters. And I couldn't really tell the difference between Helly and Helena. Sorry. They got me with that one. I was like, no way that's not Helly. But some of you knew as soon as you saw her, which I think is really cool. But I could tell the difference between Mark S and Mark Scout. I just thought it was amazing. What do you think it's a tough choice, but what do you think are the best performances in Severance season 2? All right, so now we got an answer about what Cold Harbor was, but in true Severance form, well, I hope it doesn't become Severance form. Well, let me walk you through my emotions on it. Miss Cobel tells Mark and us what Cold Harbor is. But I still can't tell you what Cold Harbor is. I think it makes no sense. So if MDR is building the minds of Innies, in this case, Gemma's, who built the minds of their Innies? Who created Mark S and Helly R and Dylan G and I forgot Irving's last initial? Like other MDR teams, like the one that briefly was with Mark at the beginning of this season. So that doesn't make any sense. And then also, how do the emotions, what other people are feeling, and by reacting to the numbers in front of them, Gemma's spouse, and then 3 strangers, how do they create an Innie for Gemma? How does what they feel how does it pertain at all to creating another version of Gemma? Wouldn't you build your own Innie? And then even more so, you might be like, well, it's because her spouse is there. He knows her so well. But don't forget that in season 1, Mark wasn't the project manager of this whole operation. That was Petey before Petey quit. Petey didn't know Gemma, so why was Petey in charge? And are there 4 people working in a group because there are 4 tempers? But then once they fired Irving, how could 3 people complete the job? So that doesn't make any sense. And then also, Miss Cobel is like, stop asking questions. I think that's what the writers are saying as well. And then also, why are they really making Innies? And why would you need 25 of them? That was obviously supposed to be a big needle drop. But I was more like, what? All right? So, I mean, like, I think a really good needle drop is where you're like, oh my God, I get it. That blows my mind. But here you're just like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts down below as well. At first, I was like, well, maybe since these Innies are rebelling, if you have someone cycle through 25 Innies, they never spend enough time in each persona to get angry. Like you're only, basically, if you're off weekends particularly, about once a month, you're only each Innie. And so that therefore they wouldn't get angry. But that's not true because even within these 25 Innies, all of Gemma's Innies seem to hate Dr. Maurer, which is, I think deserved, but really funny. And while the Cold Harbor Innie is very compliant, so was Miss Casey and seemingly all the other 25 Innies. Not one of them didn't do what was asked of them. I mean, they might have had a little more attitude, but again, it's because Dr. Maurer was in the room. However, then I thought about I watched the episode twice. And so on the second time that I watched it, I caught something that Drummond and Jame Eagan say. So Drummond, when he's, we'll talk about the lamb, but he says Lumen's eternal war against pain. And while watching the Cold Harbor test with Gemma, with the 25th Cold Harbor Innie, Jame Eagan notes that dealing with the crib doesn't bother the childless Gemma in the slightest. He says, feels nothing. It's beautiful. Well, put Dr. Maurer in the room and really test the new Innie. I was like, I don't think this is a true test. Have Dr. Maurer go in there and see if she attacks him. But here's the thing. This is my problem here. They've already proven that they can get rid of an Innie's pain with Mark S and Miss Casey. Neither of them feels the pain of losing the other. They don't even recognize each other, even after not only a lot of time together, but even a traumatizing experience. I mean, this episode, they even kiss, and it means nothing to each other. So I feel that's a test that's been passed. All right, so my theory is that during season 1, the Severance writers had no idea what MDR was doing. And they were like, oh, yay, a second season. We better come up with something. And that's why what they came up with here for season 2 doesn't fit with what was established in season 1, because they had no idea when the initial rules were established. But then this is where my epiphany came in. Does it matter? I don't think it does. I think we have to let it go. Let it go. I don't think there'll ever be a satisfying answer for what Lumen does. And for that reason, I don't think the show needs to depend on it. I mean, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. I think my initial reaction would be like, what a deeply flawed position for the show to have, that it doesn't matter what Lumen does. But I don't think that's what the show is about. Here's my theory on what the show is actually about. I think it's about 2 things. So 1, corporate culture. The companies do messed up stuff, and they don't really care about their employees or their customers or really anyone. And even more so, this is great. While corporate overlords might be the one to come up with this mess stuff, it takes the regular people who are their employees to execute it. Those are the people who do the actual hurting and who could stop it. You're starting to not care so much about what Lumen does, because that's, I think, the commentary. Don't worry, we're going to talk about Innies and Outies in a second. That's the second thing. But also with this setup, how corporate overlords feel and then being so removed from everyone else, I think that's why Lumen is depicted as so strange. Lumen is always attempting to be regular because they're not regular. That's how removed corporate overlords are from regular people in society and the rules of society. But, they're trying to make a show of it. So I think that they really do a good job of establishing the Lumen persona as a company. And that's that they're not so weird that you can easily dismiss it and be like, I'm out of here. But they're just weird enough to not only be unsettling, but captivating. They do kind of lure you in. I mean, I think one thing that's a tremendous credit to this show is that they very much establish their own vibe. That's unique to them and we've never really seen anywhere else. There have been shows like Twilight Zone, Black Mirror, et cetera. But I think Lumen, to this show's credit, they've created something that is just so uniquely and distinctly them that you would, and they keep coming up with new stuff that fits into that, which is impressive. Now, speaking of weird, how about those paintings? They had another banger this week. I would love to see who and listen to talk to who paints them. But I believe that Lumen, like so many companies, is trying to convince its employees that they're part of something that's greater than themselves, that they are contributing to something, that they're a part of something that will stand the test of time. And so it's worth the sacrifice that they're making in the now. And, the real sad trick here is that, you never get what you deserve. But hey, at least you're a part of something bigger than yourself. And that's a really horrible and cruel and empty promise. Just pay your employees what they're worth. All right, then 2, the show is also about the mythology of Innies and Outies. All right, so we made a lot of progress on that front this season. I like this in particular. Innies have insisted that they are different from their Outies. But I'm starting to think maybe not. I think they're starting to realize maybe not. Helly is becoming more and more like Helena. Britt Lauer really does do a fantastic job on the show. I wonder if the showier, maybe they'll both win all the awards. But, the question is the more subtle performance or the bigger performance going to be what captures people's attention? So Helly is becoming, I think, more and more like Helena. Not only more aggressive and sure of herself, but also selfish and competitive. And the fact that the show is willing to go there with Helly, and some of you might not like hearing that, but I think once we finish our conversation, you'll understand what I'm saying. It's really sophisticated, and I really appreciate it. And Mark? Well, clearly Mark is a romantic. That's so clear from this season finale. There's also this idea that maybe, don't worry, we're going to go into all this more. But so anyway, there's also this idea that maybe, even though Innies and Outies are alike, the Innie, more pure and untainted, is perhaps a better version. Jamie Lumen says he prefers the Innie version of his daughter, and Dylan George wishes he was more like his Innie. And for the first time, we start to really address if both an Innie and an Outie have a future. Like, what's the end game here? Oh, Lumen's bad. We want to get out of Lumen. But what would that mean for the Innie? What would that mean for the Outie beyond the company? So unlike Helena's ultimatum to Helly R in season 1, definitely not a conversation, here we have 2 conversations between Innies and Outies. And it was fascinating. So Dylan George tells Dylan G, they do this through a form, that he doesn't want his Innie to resign. Because as the better part of himself, it seems, that gives Dylan George hope that maybe that better part is, if his Innie can exist, then maybe he can reclaim that part of himself. And it makes him feel good that just a better part of him exists somewhere. I wonder if he's going to give his wife permission and they're going to have some weird threesome relationship. But anyway, I have to tell you, Dylan George, they've been painting him as kind of like this zoned out, checked out guy, the Outie. But he really has tremendous depth and maturity. I thought the way he processed what happened with his wife and his Innie, he shouldn't be so hard on himself. He should take tremendous credit for that. Very healthy and mature and intellectual. And it was just a really great response. And of course, Mark Scout and Mark S have their brilliant conversation via camcorder, which really kind of allows them to speak almost in real time. At the birthing cabin, where Mark's severance chip can be activated on and off outside of the severance floor as he steps in and out of the cabin. Such an incredible scene. It was amazing. I'm so glad they took their time with it. They both start out marveling that they're actually talking to each other. Wow, this is so cool. But then it quickly turns into an FU situation. Cobel makes it clear that the Innies' time is running out, whether they like it or not, as Lumen, as soon as this project is completed, will shut them off by firing their Outies and kill Gemma. So, Gemma will be killed. And so in exchange for helping Mark Scout save Gemma's life, his wife's life, Mark Scout offers his Innie a lifeline, reintegration, where they can both live on as one, he says. But understandably, Mark S has some questions, like, how is that going to work? I thought his questions were extremely valid. Because even if Mark Scout gains Mark S's memories, what will happen to Mark S's consciousness? I think it's pretty clear, as Mark S says, that he would be diluted into the much larger life of Mark Scout and would cease to exist. And there would be no hope of even being maybe one day turned back on because he would be erased. Do you believe that Mark S would still exist if they completed reintegration? All right, so Mark Scout made a lot of mistakes in this conversation, which I particularly picked up on the second time that I watched it. The first time I was like, this scene is amazing. And the second time I was like, you should have thought this out a little bit better, Mark Scout. So first, he let Mark S know that he's actively working to erase him with reintegration, putting yet another ticking clock on Mark S. Every time that the Outie is active, he is working to absorb Mark S. Think how terrifying that must be to Mark S. And second, Mark Scout got Helly's name wrong and was so patronizing about that relationship that has given Mark S's existence meaning. He says, I'm really glad you got to have that experience. Oh, that was so bad. Mark Scout should realize that, again, they're both romantics. And just as he will do everything in his power to be with Gemma, his Innie, Mark S, will do everything in his power to be with Helly. I loved it when Mark S said, you would know that if you'd ever taken an interest in my life before you needed something. When Mark Scout dismissed Mark S as childlike, I was like, you do not have the intellectual abilities and maturity of Dylan George. All right, so after that horrible conversation, why does Mark S still help Gemma? Here's my theory. So I think you can't, for a show that makes you think this much about what happened to it, it's got something going for it. So I think it certainly helped that when Mark S demanded that the next thing he sees better be the severance floor, which Mark Scout was keeping him away from by not going into work, sure enough, an amazing storytelling here. The mileage they're able to get out of switching between Innies and Outies continues to impress me. You're like, what more could you possibly do with this? I mean, it's fantastic. And that was what we saw next. We went right to the severance floor. And I think that was Mark Scout, his sister, and Cobel showing Mark S that they could be trusted, that they met his demand. I mean, obviously, it's still a leap of faith. I mean, that might just be like, all right, that's not going to cost us anything. Although I guess it was a show of faith very much on their part, actually, that they just had to hope that he would agree to the plan. That they never really discussed that much. All right, I don't know how they were able to follow those instructions that Irving wrote out. I'd be like, how do you know? Like, he didn't even keep his finger on the left or right, like where he was in the instructions. That was one of the most stressful parts to me. I was like, how are you following that? And then, so they are going to be shut off now that Cold Harbor is finishing. It's finishing that day. Sure, as Mark S says, he could simply not finish it. But Helly argues that maybe reintegration could work. And if Mark S has any chance at a lifeline at all, she wants him to take it because she loves him. I think Helly feels she has a lifeline too, though. Helly's not that kind of, Helly, remember, she is Helena. I think that her father just told her that he likes her better than her Outie. So more on that in a moment. So I think she feels she's got a lifeline too. And as Helly brilliantly says, what a line. I wish that these writers had more of an outline And I don't feel they have a strong sense of where they're going, but man, they can write some great stuff. So anyway, she says, even if they give us half a life, how can they expect us not to fight for it? Wow. All right, so at the very least, even if these are their final moments, I think that Mark S and Helly R feel they're going, or Helly E, feel they're going to spend their last moments at least doing something good, freeing Gemma and hurting Lumen. I mean, I don't know, Lumen's pretty slippery. I don't really know. You would think this would bring their company down, but in real life, we've seen companies get away with some pretty nutty, maybe even to some degree just as bad stuff. So, but anyway, not a bad way to go, and perhaps their only opportunity. At least they know that they can do something here, work with what you have, not think you might get something else. So, and as Helly also powerfully says, when they click on that last temper, kind of this, it's going to be go time after this. And she puts her hand on Mark S's and she says, at least it's a good one. Because, the odds are low. 3 of the 4 tempers are negative. Look how Lumen looks at life. That Kier. What a negativo stevo. Now, what about Helly R's I'm her comment to Mark S when, he's telling her, I don't want to live without you. Oh my God, it was breaking my heart. It was so beautiful. And she says, to assure him, she's like, I'm her. Let's unpack this comment. So part of me feels that maybe she's saying she's Helena Eagan, right? Go find my outie. That will be me. We're the same. But there's another, again, we know that Helly hates her outie. And I do feel part of her feels, I think I'm going to be out there. I think Jame Eagan, Pops, is going to choose me over my outie. But I think Helena and Helly, therefore, are a little bit selfish. So I don't think they would say this, but here's another option. She's saying that she is love. She is the act of love to Mark S. And if he becomes a part of Mark Scout, Mark Scout's love for Gemma, which is just like Mark S's love for Helly, he'll still be feeling those same emotions, which is why Helly says, I'm her instead of Helena. Like she's just her to Mark. That's a very philosophical, outside my body kind of answer, but that's interesting. That and meet you at the equator. Both of them not knowing what the equator is, by the way. I mean, catnip to a romantic like Mark. He's eating all this up with a spoon, baby. And Helena Eagan is, I think the outie has clearly been very much alone for a very long time now. Not only isolated physically, but I think emotionally, which is why that part of, I think she is a little bit awkward. And I think that's why her Innie has those same emotions, even though she hasn't gone through all the trauma that Helena has over the years. And I think, though, that makes them a very strong and maybe even dangerous combination. I think they're both needy, but a little bit in different ways. I think they're almost addicted to each other. Because here's the thing, and I particularly realized this when I rewatched the episode. The kind thing to do, the constructive thing to do, would have been to let Mark escape with Gemma. What do you think? But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll talk about that fateful moment in just a moment. But first, let's talk about rescuing Gemma. What a sequence! Someone was actually killed on the show. I mean, Petey died of reintegration sickness in season 1. I mean, doing medical experiments on himself. That just shows what a risk Mark Scout is taking. But also, we don't know. Maybe we don't know for sure what happened to Petey. But, think about the progression of, visually of the season. That Mark first goes from a nosebleed to being drenched in blood. I mean, thematically and visually. And that's the kind of stuff that I think, even if the show doesn't make total sense, puts it over the top. That's just so well thought out. Gwendolyn Christie. She might not work a lot, but when she does, I'm really happy for her. She didn't even have a lot of screen time here, but what a role she turned out to have. And she's there to even the odds with Drummond. Although Mark S is a surprisingly feisty fighter. Although he's, of course, fighting for his life. But I was surprised how well he was able to hold off Drummond. That was an amazing scene. And we found out what the lambs were for. Lumen sacrifices and buries a lamb with each test subject. In this case, it was going to be Gemma, to comfort them in the afterlife, just like how the pharaohs were buried. So creepy. And in the elevator, when the Severance switch makes Mark Scout accidentally pull that trigger on that special gun that they use for animals. Wow, And that's what he sees when he wakes up? I mean, they had 2 great elevator transitions. The forethought that they put into that is incredible. First with that, and then the kiss, which goes from passionate to awkward with a ding. Oh, that was amazing. And it was brilliant for Mark Scout also, by the way, to think of using his tie drenched with Drummond's blood to gain access to the Cold Harbor testing room. Oh, he's quick on his feet, boy. I don't know if I would have thought of that. That is just really, really amazing. Although, geez, is Lumen's only security guy? They were like, get Drummond. I was like, get Drummond's number 2. I mean, you would think that was like just a poorly run company, but I think it really speaks to the how little Lumen thought of their adversaries. They weren't even really adversaries, that just one security guy would be sufficient. The way Mark Scout tossed his legs out of the way to get the elevator door to close. That was just amazing. The red lights going off were also very effective. It created like a really new elevated sense of dread. Like, we've had problems before, but this is like a serious problem. I mean, you could even see it on Milchick's face where like, this could be the end, not just for the Innies. Ben Stiller, I think, did really an incredible job directing this finale. He's been growing as a director for a while now. He's directed many films for himself. But wow, a lot of times, Christopher Nolan, I've mentioned this before, his advice to Joseph Gordon-Levitt was don't be in what you direct. And I think that Ben Stiller, by not being in this, has really elevated his game to an incredible level. I mean, Jame Eagan and Helly R was another one of my favorite shots. I thought that shot was amazing. And of course, the ending shot, which is so 70s. What were some of your favorite shots from the season 2 finale? And yes, they managed to they did it. They got Gemma/Miss Casey through the exit door. Again, why is there no security at Lumen? Like they acted like once she was through the door, she was home free. Although I think that Cobel and Mark's sister are probably right out front, like with a car waiting. But, I'd be like, you couldn't maybe be in the stairwell? Maybe not Miss Cobel, because everybody knows she is. But Mark's sister could be like, I'm meeting Mark for lunch. Come on, Gemma, where's Mark? Maybe one of them should have been there to catch that door. That was so tragic because as Gemma, her chip was going off and she was, transitioning from Miss Casey back to Gemma, the door closed behind her. And darn it locks from the outside. So she couldn't just reach in and grab Mark S, and help him be like, let's go. That's real. I mean, they didn't really get a chance to discuss the plan though, because, Mark S got so upset, but coulda, woulda, shoulda. But in the hindsight's 2020, all those things. But yeah, very layered. Even that's another thing that's so great about this show. Even just the act of stepping through the door has so many different layers and is saying so many different things. So yes, she's like, let's go, Mark S. Push on the little door. Come on, you can do it. But at the last minute, Helly can't let him go. She can't lose Mark S. And I feel to some degree, because she is Helena Eagan, she can't lose, period. So in her stocking feet, for the second time she takes off her shoes, she slides, she like Tom Cruises it in Risky Business into frame. It's an amazing, beautiful shot. And she makes Mark S choose. She puts him in that position. And of course, for Mark S, there's no real choice here. And Gemma has to watch a version of her husband turn his back on her and go with another woman. And Helly, I didn't catch this the first time I watched it. And so for those of you who are like, Helly's not selfish, go back and rewatch this. Because as she and Mark S leave to go retreat further into the Severance floor, Helly looks back at Gemma. And she doesn't look back at her with sympathy or with regret or guilt, being like, I'm sorry that my joy comes at your expense. She looks back at her with pride because she won. That to me was just amazing. I mean, maybe some of you might be like, oh, Grace, it's Helena down there. I don't think, because she wouldn't be running for her life like that. But yeah, Helena is in there. She's in Helly R, and you see it there. That to me was such an amazing and complicated choice to make. So as for Mark S, why did he decide to go with Helly? I think he feels that, as he said at the beginning of the episode, Mark Scout will forget him now that he has his wife back. All these promises will just fade away. But Mark S, he saved Gemma. Gemma, he can feel good about that. He did his part, and Mark Scout got to live his life. He said 20 times more than me. He had 4 years with the love of his life, so now Mark S will take whatever time he can get with Helly R. I think that's why he made that decision. They run down the seemingly endless hallways, not even sure where they're going, not even sure where they could go, to the song, The Windmills of My Mind, because that's where they both actually exist, in the minds of their outies. All right, but I think they're going to be okay, as I said, because Jame Eagan will keep Helena's Innie around, because after all, he doesn't see Kier in his own daughter, but he sees Kier in her Innie. So that, I think, is a very important element. And just like Mark S got to dictate what Innies he would have with him when he was important to Lumen, I think Jame Eagan will let Helly have Mark S. Here's your plaything, honey. And I wonder what Lumen, by the way, speaking of a dollhouse, will present as the equator to Helly and Mark. Just be like, oh yes, this is the equator. Are you enjoying it? That could be a really Lumen-y thing, which I'm looking forward to. Well, so will Gemma now work to get Mark out? Will that feel repetitive? Maybe not, because she'll have people working with her. Like maybe Cobel will work with her, and Dylan, and maybe even Irving. Irving! He really did ride that train off into the sunset. Last episode, I was sure that when Mark and his sister were meeting up with Cobel for the first time, and they're like, what are we doing out here? I thought Irving would pull up as well. I thought Cobel would bring him into the loop. But it turns out he's not on her radar at all until she finds out. And I gotta say, Patricia Arquette has some amazing line delivery. Like at first I was like, what's with this performance, Patricia? But now I'm like, go on. I'm really enjoying it. And when she finds out that Irving knows and drew a picture of the long dark hallway with the elevator, she's like, what? I'm like, I loved it. His knowledge of that still has not been explained. So you got to come back, Irving. You got to come back. The casting on this show really is quite good. Robbie Benson, he was the voice of the Beast in Beauty and the Beast all those years ago. His Dr. Maurer, so creepy. He looks like an Eagan, though, to me. I had to keep looking it up, being like, are you sure he's not an Eagan related? He looks so much like Jame Eagan. As well as Sandra Bernhard as the nurse. What a great performance. This episode when she was screaming, it's the spouse! And then when she and Mark Scout just kind of yelled at each other, and then didn't fight. That was fantastic. And finally, although that's interesting that Mark S was willing to fight. He took the other guy hostage, helped got him under control, then took him as hostage. And would he have jumped the nurse? And then finally, Mr. Milchick. So I think his best moment this season was actually last episode, when he finally, having had enough, told Drummond to devour feculence. Oh, it was great. But while that was his best moment this season, I think he certainly had incredible moments in this finale. Right from the get-go. I loved it when he gave Dylan G the paperwork from the Outie. He was like, not only will I think this will maybe elicit an embarrassing emotional response, but I'm late. So he literally turned out and ran out of the room. And like in a really aggressive way, too. It was just a great moment. I was like, that's so Milchick. I loved it. And clearly, the party that he was going to, the celebration of finishing Cold Harbor, was supposed to raise the bar on the now classic music dance experiment from season 1. So that at first I was like, you're just trying to do that again. But they did it so well and raised the bar on it so much. I'm like, what are you going to do next season? I mean, how are you going to top this? I mean, it was really successful thanks to Tremel Tillman's performance, both serving up looks and trying to also do his job. I mean, they're giving Milchick such a great undercurrent storyline that he himself is almost starting to rebel against Lumen. He's really struggling with his job externally because, these Innies are tough. He's like, I don't think he should have been like, I'm not getting paid enough for this. But then also internally, he feels that he's maybe not even, he's being treated just as poorly. Although, I wonder when his conscience is gonna, his moral compass, let's say, is gonna kick in. I think it's close. Although I have to say, why would a marching band made up of college kids agree to be severed? That didn't make any sense to me. Anyway, this sequence, though, was amazing. It was so well layered, and it had so many great progressions to it. It started out as this creepy, Carousel of Progress talk show. And then, it was great, and then it had this great performative nature to it with the band, the marching band. And then it turned into an action sequence with great hero moments for both Helly and Dylan. I mean, when Helly was like, the way I wasn't sure how Mark S was going to get out of there, but I thought Helly, that was a great plan. That was just brilliant. All right. And then Dylan, of course. I think that's, now it just occurred to me, his Outie reminded him of who he was, and that he had another great hero moment. He is a badass. All right. So that's my spoiler review of Severance season 2. I didn't get as much as I wanted, but I got enough. And I, again, love these characters so much. I can't wait to see what happens to them next. Please don't take too long. All right, so what about you? What did you think? What are some of your theories? What do you think were the answers that we were given in the new questions that have been raised? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.